My goal in the next few minutes is to introduce you to ESI's online Revit training and to give you a few minutes to meet the trainer, Chad Close. Originally, ESI put together our Revit online training for our own internal purposes. We found that we were doing millions and millions of square foot of modeling, and we needed skilled field people to do some of this modeling, people that understood what was going on in the field. In a moment, Chad is going to discuss with you the very specific details of our online training and how you can benefit the most from that training. But before we go into the details, I want to talk just briefly about your own personal development and growth. What we want to do is to set some of your personal goals and how you can develop your Revit skills or your BIM skills. We've broken these skills down to 4 different categories or 4 different tiers. Tier 4, for example, is where you can open a Revit or a BIM model. You can move around, change views, and you can maybe create some views or output to AutoCAD or DWF or a Navisworks file, and you can do all this with the confidence that you're not going to damage the model. Tier 3 is where you create families and you modify existing models. Again, you won't damage the BIM model, but now you're starting to create content for a model. Tier 2, turnkey skills. Skills such as being able to take a model from scratch and produce it, set it up, and follow through a full end product of BIM, which would include a great deal of information, not just graphical views. And finally, Tier 1, that's your BIM model manager, someone who can possibly take a series or a group of different teams working separately and oversee the model standards, the model integrity, and how the model turns out in the end. So those are the 4 different tiers that you can aspire to develop your Revit skills with using our online training. So now it's time that since we've laid the groundwork for you to meet the trainer, Chad Close. And so I want to introduce you to Chad Close, and he is ESI's Revit trainer, and we appreciate his quality work that you're about to enjoy. So, Chad, I have a couple of questions. The first one I want to ask is, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background. How did you get to the point where you're at with BIM?
Sure. I have 16 years of experience in the construction and design industries. I started off with AutoCAD version 12, so that might not mean much to most folks, but it's a few years back. And basically in the mid-90s, I started working with Autodesk products. And the first half of my career was basically related to architectural and structural drafting in AutoCAD, in that platform, working with architectural and structural firms. And basically some of those projects included the expansion of the American Airlines terminal at JFK back in the early 2000s, as well as the work on the American Express building after the 9/11 attacks. So that's some of my production background. Now, the second half of my career has been mostly in Revit, and I've been working on a variety of projects, hospitals, schools, jails with Revit, commercial projects as well, residential projects. And in those firms, a lot of those firms were either starting up with Revit or transitioning from 2D drafting to Revit, and so they needed some guidance, some expertise along the way, and in those cases I was able to provide that, help those firms transition, help establish standards, help bring the skills of the group up to speed, so that way they could do their own construction documentation and modeling. So at this point in my career, I currently teach all Revit platforms. I teach Revit Structure, Revit MEP, Revit Architecture, and I do this via live training. Typical classroom situation. I also do it via recordings or over the internet in a live way. I do those types of classes as well. And I provide technical support for those who get stuck with the software.
Good. And we really appreciate your work with us in ESI and in developing those online training scenarios and help. So appreciate that very much. So give us an overview. What can a student expect from the online training that you developed with ESI?
Well, there's actually a couple tracks that we've done. We've recorded a executive training series for executives. The idea being that these videos aren't necessarily to help you use AutoCAD in a day-to-day production setting. It's for executives to understand the way Revit works, to help them with executive decisions and to guide those who are under them when they're working on projects. But we also provided another track of videos, about 40 hours of videos that help students learn the functionality of Revit, the tools, the way Revit works, why Revit works the way it does. And the idea was that these principles that they learn from, because we used a few examples, some residential, some commercial, but the point is that I spoke in generalities to help folks understand the concepts of Revit, and these principles that you learn through the videos will be applied universally, whether you're working on commercial projects, whether you're working on residential, whether you're doing it for the construction industry, whether you're doing it for a design firm. So basically, one thing that needs to be kept in mind, Revit's a huge program. There's almost no limit to what you can learn.
Good. So explain what mental gyrations a student may go through in their learning experience. The point is, we don't want people to get discouraged. So what can they expect, frustration-wise or psychologically, while they're learning these tools?
Well, to quote Yoda, if you come from a background where you've already learned CAD in some form or another, you have to unlearn what you have learned, because this isn't CAD, it's not even 3D CAD to a certain extent. Building information modeling is a different software, it's a different process. And so to the extent that you can abandon old thought patterns, old terminology, not make everything analogous to what you used to do in CAD, that what you're doing in Revit, that will be to your advantage. It's not bad to have that background. I'm not saying that it's bad to know what it's like to do electronic drafting from AutoCAD or some other platform. However, you need to understand that if you want to progress and you don't want to get stuck, then you need to make sure that you embrace the BIM concept. And pretty much everybody that I know that has not tried to make Revit fit into what they used to know, what other programs they used to know, they've been able to move on, and they actually embrace the concept. They say they never want to go back because they understand what value building information brings to the table as opposed to either 2D or three-dimensional CAD drafting, and start practicing as soon as possible the things that you've learned. In fact, I typically encourage students to start modeling their own home. It may not be what you do in your workplace, you may not do architectural modeling, but if you start putting it in practice immediately after learning the videos, then you'll retain that information better. And of course, if you forget, you always have the videos to go back to.
Good. I want to emphasize a point that Chad just made, and I appreciate you making that point, Chad. Practice is the key. We lose almost 70% of what we learn within just a very short period of time, and so it's important that you do practice. Now, you can get a free trial of many of the different Revit platforms. You can buy Revit LT inexpensively, or you can use a Revit full version. But the point is practice. It's like a musical instrument. If you use it, the skills will come, you become passionate about it, and you'll really develop those skills. So we found that to be a key to success in our organization. So practice, practice, practice. That's pretty much what we would like to recommend for any user. So what final recommendation, Chad, do you have for the trainees?
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is that the software itself is meant to be a collaborative tool. And so to the extent that the users can collaborate with each other, the learners can collaborate with each other as they're learning the software, the better. There's a saying that iron sharpens iron, and that's true. The more that you bounce things off of other people, a lot of times the sharper you become, the quicker you understand certain concepts. I know that at times, and I've experienced this several times during my professional career, that a lot of times you'll get stuck with the software and you'll just start explaining the problem to another person instead of spinning your wheels trying to figure it out on your own. And when you do, just by explaining what's going on, what's going wrong, why you can't do a certain thing. A lot of times, that in itself, without the other person uttering a word, the light bulb goes off, and oh, that's right, that's a solution.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Chad. There's one thing I want to thank you for too, especially is for any of us that have ever gone through video training, we know how cold and calculated and scripted it can be. What I really love about your style, your teaching style is, and you students are going to notice this when you listen to Chad's online training, he's very extemporaneous. It's almost as if it's a complete dialogue between you and he. That helps in the learning process, because now you're integrating a conversation along with the learning process, and you really feel like he's right there with you in training. So I appreciate that style that you have, and we know that it'll benefit the students. So in review, whatever your role is, whether you're a facilities manager, an engineer, an architect, a CAD drafter that wants to go to Revit, possibly you're a high school student, a community college student, or even a university student, and you want these skills, we really, really hope that you benefit from our online training. We know Revit is very much a future for all information management in buildings, and we look forward to you benefiting from that. So thank you for taking a few minutes with us, Chad. Thank you for your time, and we appreciate it. Thank you. Have a nice day.